What is going on, guys? We are back with our next tier list video. It's been a while since I have made some tier list videos, so we're going to be making an updated Air Force one, updated Ground Force one, and then eventually as they add some more Navy officers into the game, that'll be kind of integrated as well. A lot of you love these tier list videos. There is a small amount of you that love to hate on these tier list videos, so if you are in that category of love to hate on these videos, feel free to do as much hating, insulting, and crying as you want right there in the comments below. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back, guys. I'm excited to get this updated Air Force tier list video out to you, but before we get started, if you enjoyed these tier list videos, if you want to see more of them in the future, and if you get any value out of them, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. With that being said, let's jump into the tier list maker and get started. All right, guys, we are now in the tier list maker here, and I want to go over the actual different categories here so everything is clear on the front end, and then we will start going through and ranking the officers accordingly. So we have got the must-haves, the S tier, the outstandings, A tier, mid is B tier, mediocre is C tier, and then suck-ass is D tier. Don't touch them, don't look at them, don't invest in them. And then this bottom one is not an actual tier at all. This is just for me to be able to separate all of the Air Force officers from the craziness going on down here, which is all of the Ground Force and Navy officers. So again, this is just kind of a holding place for the Air Force officers. These first 5 categories are the ones we are going to be actually working with. Now, for the sake of respecting your time, but also making sure that I get you all of the relevant information, I'm going to place these officers in each one of the tiers that I feel like they correctly go into. I might give a little bit of supporting detail on, some of them, maybe all of them. We'll see, but I'm not going to go into like a super long, lengthy, in-depth explanation on each of them, again, just for the sake of respecting your time. And then lastly, these Air Force officers that are in this category are in literally no specific order. They just got thrown in there, and we're going to go through right down the line, left to right, and start placing them. Starting with number 1 here, we have El Cartero. I'm going to throw him into the A tier category here. He is a bomber-specific officer, and his big draw or appeal is the fact that he has the ability to freeze units in the open field when he hits them. You can play with him a variety of ways. You can obviously just target units specifically with your bomber, and that's fine. What a lot of people do, I've done this myself, is if you're in your base is placed in a pretty heavily combat zone area, troop drives by your base going to kill, something in your alliance territory, you can send your bomber out, freeze him, chase him down with one of your tanks. You can approach it that way. There's a lot of different strategies you can take with El Cartero. Next up on the list, we've got Lone Eagle, and he is a, no question, S tier officer. He's a bomber-specific officer that does just a load of damage. He does really well on any bomber unit that you want to put him on. He does exceptionally well on tracker bombers, though, specifically the Martyr bomber and the Vanguard bomber. If you're running a Martyr bomber, for example, and you're going after tank units, he just is devastatingly effective. Brisk Eagle, Generation 1 officer, one of the first officers that you are going to have access to in Warpath right when you start playing the game. She absolutely sucks ass. You can still one of her kills, or I'm sorry, not one of her kills, one of her skills for the skill training system if you see fit, but outside of that, don't worry about her. Next up is going to be Polar Phantom. Polar Phantom is going to go into the A tier category. I've had him in past tier list videos. I'm talking, a year or more ago. Once upon a time, he was an S tier when there wasn't as many options in the Air Force ranks, but as time has gone on, more and more officers have been added. He's starting to move his way down the list, but I still think he is a high-value officer. He's not an absolutely must-have. There are going to be other fighter officers down this list that are definitely better than him, but he's still, especially if you were a player that runs 2, especially 3-fighter situation there, he's definitely going to find a place in your lineup. He's got the ability to do AoE damage in the air, meaning attack multiple Air Force units at one time, so there's a big advantage and value from that. So I'm going to go with A tier. Next up, we've got Inferno. Inferno's a good officer, bomber-specific officer. Does a lot of damage output there. Not going to go too crazy in depth with him, but he's going to be in the A tier for me. Next up, we've got Heaven's Savior, which absolutely sucks ass. He is freaking terrible. Arguably, the worst Air Force officer in the entire game. I mean, truly, he is trash. Next up is going to be Silver Comet. I'm going to throw Silver Comet into the mid category here. He's not a bad officer. Now, he's not going to survive and have a whole lot of relevancy in the late stages of the game, especially. He's an earlier officer that you're going to have access to. He's one of the better early game officers for Air Force fighters specifically that you were going to have access to. So he'll give you value on the early stages of the game, but mid, especially in-game stage, not really that relevant. But depending on, your kind of officer setup, you could extract some value out of him. If you used him, which we're going to jump back into the game to actually talk about her because unfortunately she was not added to this tier list maker. I don't know why, but hopefully we can get that fixed. But Fleeting Arrow is another really, really good Air Force officer. So paired with something like her, maybe that makes a little sense. Conversation for, a different video. But I'm going to go B. He's not bad. He's not somebody you want to prioritize, late game. Next up is going to be Witcher, and you could make a case, honestly, for having her B, C. She's definitely not a suck-ass officer. She's definitely not an outstanding officer. I'm going to go B, simply because, she can play what a lot of people do is they will run, if they're running like a 3-fighter combo, for example, or a 2-fighter, 1-bomber situation, they'll fly in a fighter first, and then they'll follow it up with the bomber, right? Or, again, if they're running 3 fighters, they'll send what we call our tanking office or our tanking units, Air Force units, in first, followed by 2 attack fighter planes that are there specifically to deal damage. If you're going to be in one of those situations and you want to have a unit like, let's say, a Martyr's fighter that's made for, its dodging capability, its maneuverability, its damage absorption, put her on that with her dodge capabilities. She plays a pretty good role in that, but she is pretty niche. Outside of that, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of value to extract from her. Up next is Blade Wing. Blade Wing is going to be a B tier officer for me. He was once upon a time ranked higher than that, but he is starting to lose a little bit of relevancy. There's just too many other really good fighter officers, in my personal opinion, to have him ranked any higher than that. It's not saying he's a bad officer per se. I still use him. But the only reason I still use him is because I haven't invested in any Air Force officers in a very long time. I've been focused on doing other things. But he used to be one of the better officers, and I'm talking like 2 years ago kind of thing-ish. But he's starting to make his way down the list, to be honest. Wings of Glory, suck ass. First generation officer, one of the first that you're going to unlock in the game, just like the other 2 here. Yeah, he's trash. Just stay away. Up next is going to be Nagarani. Now, this one is one that's probably going to divide some people. I think you could make a case for her as an S-tier officer. I also think you could make a case for her as a super top-end, top-of-the-line A-tier officer. Sorry if that just I hit my mic there, so sorry if it made any noise there. So you could make, in my personal opinion, you could make a valid case to have her an S-tier or A-tier. I also think which category she goes in is going to be dependent upon which officer she gets paired with. If she's kind of on her own, meaning she's not with an optimal officer, she's going to be an A tier. I'm going to throw her S tier, and I'm going to explain why here in just a minute. Now, Darkwing is obviously an S tier officer. That's, pretty obvious. But he is an exclusive lounge officer, so if you are a free-to-play or a low-tier spender, it is going to take you a very long time to actually acquire him and unlock all of his skills. But if you're a big pay-to-win player, then definitely invest in him. If you are focused on your Air Force, he's going to give you a lot of value. Next up is going to be Rictus Reaper. He is going to be a mediocre officer. Now, here's why. He's actually not a terrible officer. He's not a great officer either. He's also an exclusive lounge officer, which means it's either going to take you, A, a lot of time to fully awaken him, or B, it's going to take you a lot of money to fully awaken him, neither of which you should do or invest. You should not invest your time in him, and you should not invest your money in him. There's just too many other good exclusive lounge officers. He is probably at the very bottom of the list in terms of value from exclusive lounge officers. And with that being said, you're not going to get any value out of him. I shouldn't say that. You're not going to get nearly, the full amount of value until he's fully awakened, right? And that's going to take a long, long time. And there's also other free-to-play accessible bomber officers that are they're just too good now to even waste any time with Rictus Reaper. Next up is going to be Sky Jockey, and this is the one that I'm going to kind of double back here and wrap into the Nagarani conversation. I'm going to go S tier because these two together are a very lethal combination when it comes to fighter planes. Nagarani is more of a defensive-focused officer, and Sky Jockey is more of an offensive-focused officer. So paired together, they complement each other very, very well. And I think having them together also really amplifies and brings out the full value that they both offer. And I think that pushes them into the S tier. All right, now jumping into the game real quick, Fleeting Arrow, like I said, is one of them that was not added to the actual tier list. I'm going to try to get that taken care of, so I apologize. But jumping back in here real quick, Fleeting Arrow is an exclusive lounge officer. As you can see, I have not invested in her. But she's going to be an S tier officer. She is, a pretty well-rounded officer. She does, if you're going to focus on fighter specifically, you can definitely get some value out of her. Now, in terms of exclusive lounge officers specifically, out of the two fighter officers, meaning Darkwing and Fleeting Arrow, I would personally say if you're going to try to maximize the amount of damage and kills that you can get with your fighters, I would suggest investing in Darkwing first. But Fleeting Arrow is not a bad option. I do think, like I said, she brings a lot of value in a lot of different dynamics and ways within the game, so that's why I would place her into the S tier. Next up is going to be a newer officer here in Warpath, Dawn Striker. She is a bomber-specific officer. She is going to offer you a lot of value. I'm going to place her for her skills. She's going to go S tier. She's got a lot of value now. Of course, whether you invest in her or not is really kind of going to be dependent upon if you're focusing more on fighters, if you're going to be focused more on bombers. So that's obviously going to play a role. But if you are going to be a bomber-focused player, Dawn Striker is definitely one that you want to have a look at. All right, thankfully I caught this before the end of the video, but I just realized that Rising Star is actually not on the tier list, or maybe I overlooked him. I don't know, but I didn't see him on the tier list, so I'm going to talk to them and the Warpath team and see if we can get him added to it. I am, just to clarify why they're not on there, I'm not responsible for these tier lists in regard to actually getting all the officers uploaded. That's actually handled by the actual Warpath team. So I'm going to talk to them, see if they can get them added. But Rising Star is a bomber officer. Now, in short, Rising Star is going to be an S tier bomber officer. He reduces the bombing efficiency time, meaning he's going to get his bombs delivered on target at a faster rate, which obviously means that you're going to be able to get in and out of danger quicker, which is obviously always a good thing. When he's awakened, his damage coefficient gets up to 1,700. So there's just a lot of value here that you can get from Rising Star, especially if you are running a bomber. And he's good on all three bombers, whether it's a Liberty bomber going after an idle or offline group of artillery or something like that, or if you are running a tracker bomber and hunting down tanks or whatever the case may be. All right, last but certainly not least, the great Golden Pixie. She is going to be an S tier officer. No, I'm just kidding. That was just a dig at all of you that like to troll and bitch and moan and cry about a tier list video that I did who knows freaking how long ago, before just about all of these really high-end officers were even added to the game. You guys are hating on me about that. Well, I don't know. Look when the video was made, guys. The vast majority of you all are very smart people. You possess common sense, but there is a small group of you, and I won't name any names, but there's a small group of you in the game that have, like, at very best, 2 flickering brain cells that compete for dominance every single day. So common sense is not a tool that you guys possess. But with that being said, that was just a troll. So Golden Pixie, of course, is not an S tier officer any longer, but that does not change the fact that she is still, at least as of this moment in time, at the time of recording and releasing this video, she is still the only officer in Warpath, bomber officer to clarify, that does 5 rounds of bombing. All of the others do the standard 4. For that reason, I'm going to put her into the A tier category. Does she do a significant amount of damage? No. Is she a valuable officer to have? Yes, because if you pair her with a very, very, very good officer, and I'm not saying it's the most optimal pairing, I'm just theoretically speaking here, if you were to pair, let's say Golden Pixie with a Lone Eagle, right? He is a monster, dealing a ton of damage. So if you can, with the, tech increasing, we've just got the new tech tree that recently came out. Plus, obviously, a lot of people have invested in their tanks specifically. Again, this is just a hypothetical scenario. Tanks have gotten really strong. So if you can do 5 passes with Lone Eagle instead of 4, with the amount of damage he is able to dish out, you're obviously going to farm more kills. She's not a bad standalone officer. She is truly not. She's definitely not an S tier officer. And if she didn't have the ability to give you 5 passes when you're bombing, she would definitely be in the suck ass category. But that 5th and fully awakened skill, the extra bombing run, is what keeps her relevant for a lot of players and why she's still an A tier officer. Now, the last thing I want to say here, so that way I hopefully clear up any kind of confusion or anything like that. Should you invest in her first? Not anymore. Once upon a time, if you were going after a bomber, she would be a really good one to have and invest in early. Not anymore. You should wait until the 3rd and now 4th generation officers become available in your server. If you are a new player, invest in them first. And then after you start to get some Air Force tech upgraded, as you start to upgrade your units, so on and so forth, then you can look at bringing Golden Pixie in to the conversation. But do not spend your golden officer statues on her right out of the gate. Hold them and wait for an officer like Lone Eagle first. All right, guys, that is going to wrap us up for the Air Force officer tier list video. Again, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions, if you agree or disagree. And if you feel like you have nothing better to do with your time, which is a sad situation in its own regard, but if you feel like you have nothing better to do with your time, or even if it's not a feeling and you just actually don't have anything to do better with your time, feel free to cry and moan in the comments below so we can all laugh at you. If you have stuck around and made it this far into the video, if you've got access to Discord and are not already in our community Discord server, the link to that is going to be in the description of the video. Click on that link. It will take you right into the community Discord server. Whether you are a new player or a veteran player, it doesn't matter. Absolutely everybody is welcome. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video today, and we'll see you on the next one.